Hi, I'm Deanna. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. Today I have a very short video for you for total beginners, people who are wondering what is the difference between rug hooking and punch needle. Very different. Still rug making, equally fantastic, great results with both, but some significant differences from one to the next. So I'm going to start out by showing you rug hooking. Now, rug hooking can be done with yarn, which is my favorite, or wool strips. You get machines or with the scissors or with rotary cutters, you cut the wool into strips. It can be quite skinny like this. It can be thicker like this. It can be super thin yarn. It can be even thicker than this, which is a number 8, known as a primitive cut. When you are rug hooking, you're using a hook and you're going through your backing and pulling up the fabric, making a loop on the surface. There are all different kinds of hooks that people use. You have lots of choices. There are long shafts, there are short shafts, there are tiny little fiddly skinny ones like this. I don't use those for anything because I tend to hook with a wider strip or a thicker yarn. It goes faster that way too. This is the hook that I sell. It's the Joan Moshimer hook. It has a blue tip. It's known as large or coarse or primitive. But for me, this is the hook that I use 9 out of 10 times, more than 9 out of 10 times. People will sell you any kind of hook that you will buy, but you will find that you end up with one hook in your hand more than 99% of the time. This is a different style for people who prefer this. This is an Irish hook or a pen hook. It's a long hook. It's held this way. Others have more of a body that you can pull on. It depends on what you like, but it's good to start out with a very simple hook with, in my opinion, a large head on it. I'm going to show you what rug hooking looks like on my teaching frame. So this is a teaching frame. This is a piece of like wire screen from the window to show you how this is done. I'm going to start hooking with a thick primitive, right? So what I'm doing, I'm holding my piece on my lap. Pretend that this is not window screen and it is backing. There's a picture on it that you drew a commercial pattern or something that you bought, vice versa. You are literally putting your hook under the fabric. You see my hand wrapping the fabric, the strip around, and I'm pulling it up to the surface. And then I pull it back down till I get it to the height I like it. The rule of thumb is that your pile, your loops, should be about as high off the surface as your piece is wide. This is a skinnier piece. This will be a lot less high off the surface, a much lower pile. I'm going from hole to hole, sticking my needle in, wrapping it around, and pulling it through the hoop. And then I kind of pull back down to get it the height that I want. I do this as many times as I need to fill in my space. You don't necessarily have to go into every single hole. You make sure that the coverage is good and you don't have lots of gaping holes that we call holidays, but you also make sure that you're not putting them so close together that it's warping everything, because that's called packing. These are all things that you figure out further along. But the act of rug hooking looks like this. Putting your hook in, pulling up a piece of strip, wool, yarn, whatever you're using, and you end up with a bunch of loops that look like this, like ribbon candy. That's why my company is called Ribbon Candy Hooking, that look like this. Do they have to be perfect and even? Absolutely not. A lot of people like to hook in a wild style with furry yarns and eyelash lines, yarns and all kinds of novelty fun things, and you never get an even surface. Some people are a bit more sort of fastidious, a little more OCD in the way they like things to look and to be, and they maybe prefer a more even surface. But if you are pulling up loops and you like the loops, then you have done it. As soon as you pull that first loop, you are a rug hooker, and it is just a question from that point on, what do you feel like hooking? What colors do you want to do it in? Do you want wide strips, thin strips? What do you want to hook with? You are a hooker after the first loop. Punch needle is different. With punch needle, we are working with something that looks like this. Now, there are 2 kinds of punch needles traditionally. I sell this one, which is what we would call a fine punch needle with a bit of a fine hole. This is a larger one. This is called a regular, has a much bigger hole. This is an Amy Oxford. This is a special edition peacock punch. But this is a much larger tool. So let me show you what punch needle looks like. It looks like this. This is monk's cloth, which is the only backing you can use for punch needle. The reason I stock this needle for myself is that I often like to use thin yarns, lace yarns, things like this from the Pretty Knitting Store. Sometimes I like to use things like this from the craft store that are super cheap, and you get a ton of different colors from one skein. I'm just going to pull a little bit out and show you what punching looks like. You get your punch needle. It typically has an eyelet in it. You put your little string through the eyelet. Of course, the larger punch needle, called the regular, can fit a thicker yarn, but if you're using that one, it's also going to make a bigger hole. Let me just show you what I mean. When you're punching with the regular, can you see how big those holes are coming out? Let me bring you even closer. Some people don't like how hard it is to punch through and make such a big hole every time. This one, you cover a lot more ground that way. You have a lot more sort of choices of wools. I do a lot with dyeing 3-ply wools. Those will only go through the larger punch needle. But I like this little guy. I think he's fast and fun. With punch needle, you're working from the backwards forwards. I'm punching through like this. I'm going into just about every space of my monk's cloth. Really depends on your eye. You have to judge as you go. I didn't thread this one a ton, but you can see I'm making progress. But right now, I'm going to pull this out. I am looking at the back of the punch needle. When I flip my design over, I'll take it off for you. When I flip my design over, that's the front. So with punch needle, you're working back to front. You're always working back to front, which means you need to reverse your patterns if they have an orientation that's specific. On the front is where I'm seeing my little row of loops, right? So back to front with punch needle, front to back with rug hooking. One of the other things about punch needle that's different is I am punching down. I am punching down. So right now I'm using a hoop that's called a stepped hoop or a lap hoop or a quilt hoop. It has a second level. You don't really need the second level because with rug hooking, remember this hand is going to be feeding the wool up. And so you need a space between here and here for your hand to be feeding the wool. But with punch needle, you don't need that. You could actually just have a regular hoop from the craft store, lean it up against a table, and just be punching down. There's no hand underneath with punch needle. So pluses and minuses are however you see it. Punching backwards to forward is punch needle. You need to reverse your designs. You get a slightly different effect. You can control the height of your loops with washers or by buying different sized needles. The needle I sell comes with washers, so you can make your pile higher or lower. Sometimes people make a higher pile and clip it so it looks like a short, little bit of a shaggy latch hook look, not quite so pixelated or shaggy. And rug hooking is completely different. You're pulling wool up in loops from underneath. They are both fantastic. They are both traditional. They both date back to the 19th century. Neither of them are new. Both of them are easy. Both of them are fun, clean, easy to pack, easy to travel with. Both great hobbies, but they're very different. You can do punch needle and rug hooking in the same piece, but at one point you would have to flip the piece over because one of them you're working backward to forward and the other forward to backward. So it just depends on what you like and what grabs you. Different tools for both. You need to buy either a punch needle or a rug hook. I sell both of those things at Rub and Candy Hooking. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It was just fast and furious, the difference between rug hooking and punch needle. Take care. I'll see you soon.